Hello and welcome to this episode of Avatar Face to Face. I'm your host, Jewel Kinch-Thomas, and we always have just the most wonderful time bringing you information about the arts and culture. The arts and culture community in Westchester and beyond, and sharing with you the work that's being done in and around New Rochelle, White Plains, all of the areas that we hope that you take a moment to go out and experience the art that is being created. So, on today's show, we have a young lady that has some of the most fascinating artwork that I have experienced. Her name is Ann Lomonaco, and she is a mixed media constructionist. Can I
Yes,
say that? Okay, welcome to the show, Ann.
thank you so much.
Okay, it is wonderful to have you here. I'm just totally fascinated by the work that I see that you have done and that you continue to do. And I must say that only very recently did I become aware of this type of recycled and repurposed materials in artwork and some of the most beautiful things that can be created from it. So we want to share that information with our viewers today and really give something people something to be excited about. So now let me ask you, when did you, well, let me start here. How long have you been involved in mixed media work?
I think I would say probably about 15 years putting different media together.
Okay.
I've been an artist for, I think, about 33 to 35 years.
Okay, okay. So then what brought you to look at mixed media as the material of choice?
Well, I started out getting a degree in fibers at Parsons School of Design
Okay.
and became a paper maker, making one of a kind handmade paper, three-dimensional constructions.
Okay.
And that involved a 9-foot vacuum table and a beater, which made a lot of noise and lots of water. And I made a paper from cloth and then put them together into constructions.
Wow.
And at a certain point, I decided to leave the studio and move my studio, which had been out of my home, into my home. And at that time, I think it had been about 18 years of doing the handmade paper.
Okay.
And the move to my home had certain restrictions and setting up a studio in terms of space and also the water issue. And I think I felt like I was ready to start new media. And it sort of evolved into looking around and looking at what I look at every day
Right.
and looking at it in a different way. And it segued into mixed media constructions.
Okay, so there, if I'm hearing you correctly, there wasn't a decision to say, okay, I'm going to move from the paper constructions to mops or to. Did you what was the transition there?
Well, as you mentioned, the mops, from the beginning when I was at Parsons, um, I began to look at kitchen mops. I used to go to the Rockefeller wing of the Metropolitan Museum. I looked at the beautiful African sculptures and I just resonated with them.
Uh-huh.
And one day, this was, when I was still in school, I happened to notice my kitchen mop leaning against the wall, and that I sort of noticed how beautiful I thought the mop was. And so the mops have been the consistent element that took me from paper to mixed media.
Okay.
Because my first paper was made from grinding up kitchen mops and making paper out of them, because mops are made of cellulose fibers,
Okay.
cotton,
Okay.
and paper can be made from cellulose fibers. And in the process, I got focused on the mops, so they have been a consistent element. I think I'm working on my 16th one, and the mops are the connection because I use all kinds of materials in the mops as I transform them.
Okay.
And so they involve mixed media, and from there it was sort of naturally went into looking at all these different materials, not just for the mops, but for other forms of art.
Okay. So let's stay with the mops for a moment.
Okay.
Here you are, you're in your home, and for most of us, we look at the mop and we go, oh, geez, drudgery.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to clean.
Yes.
You looked at the mop and said, wow, that's beautiful
I
in
did.
some fashion. And it connected with you, and you decided, okay, the inspiration being the headdresses,
Yes.
and you connected the headdresses with the mop, the look, the fiber,
I
the
did.
material, and you said, okay, this is what I can create from this?
I looked at them and started to think without the pole,
Mm-hmm.
what can I do with these?
Okay.
And interestingly for me, that process, and I love the process of experimenting and exploration,
Okay.
and I love not knowing what's going to happen
Hmm.
and then just seeing. So I bought a carton of mops, white mops,
Right.
and I dyed them different colors with no pre-planning.
Mm-hmm.
I dyed them different colors, and after each mop, which was the same construction and form, after it became a color, it became something different. I went through a process with each of them over the years of trying to find out what that particular mop was going to be.
Okay.
And in that process, I learned how to bead, and I learned how to take soda can tabs and paint them and manipulate them and use them in the mops, and I use nails in the mops, and I think that just has led me to find hardware stores among my favorite places. Truly.
That's really phenomenal, and
Yeah.
so incredibly inventive. I mean, when you say you take a mop head and then use all kinds of media to create a piece of art,
Hmm.
whether that be nails or feathers or buttons or
All of the
soda
above.
can tops, and we've been showing some of your work as we're speaking,
Oh,
so
good.
folks can really see the end result that we're talking about here, and it's really phenomenal. So I congratulate you. That's
Thank you.
that's
And I have a really, um, the best word is to say fun. It's like
mm,
I just keep experimenting and looking at things. I truly feel like it has helped me stand in a new place and look at something I look at all the time
right.
and look at it for the first time.
Uh,
So it's very exciting for me.
okay, I can imagine then that during the course of your day, given that you've been doing this for so long, you're constantly being inspired by ordinary everyday things.
Yes. One of the pieces, it happened to be a paper piece, but for years I looked at my Venetian blinds on my windows and I would raise them and lower them. And I kept thinking someday I have to use that concept
Uh huh.
and of the stacking of the blind pieces,
Right.
and they're equidistant from each other, and
Right.
someday I'm going to have to figure something out, and it was in the back of my head. And one day I came up with an idea using the concept. I didn't know if it would work, stacking things, making the equidistant, and it turned into one of my totally favorite pieces. And unfortunately, there is no image right now of it,
Uh huh.
but it for me personified or clarified how something gets put into your mind. You
Mm-hmm.
never know when you're going to use it,
Right.
and then in a way you think of it in a new way.
Okay.
And so, yes, everywhere I look, I see something.
That's like discovery
Yeah.
on the most I want to say most provocative level in terms of, well, what can I use this everyday item,
Hmm.
what can I use it to create? How can it can become something other than what the normal, sort of mundane use
Right.
for it is?
And to also, I think something that's always a challenge is to try to transform something so that so that when when people look at it, it takes them a minute to really realize what it is, because it's not just that you take it and here it is, but it's changed.
Right, right.
And sometimes I'm happier with the results than others, and I continue, especially with the mops, to work on them. There are some I finished 3 or 4 years ago,
Hmm.
and I'm still tweaking or changing.
Okay.
So
That's interesting that you say that, because I was just going to ask you, well, how long does it take you from the time you have that first aha moment when you look at
it
that
is an aha
object?
moment, right?
Yes. How long does it take you then, until you discover what it is you want to mold that into? But you've just said that you're still tweaking stuff 3, 4 years later, possibly.
And and it's funny, like I sometimes I get stuck. I get an idea and I really want it to work,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going ahead and doing it and transforming, and I look at it, and somewhere I know that it's not quite right, but I've put in all this time and it's almost right, and I let it sit for a while and
Okay.
try to sort of convince myself that it's really fine.
Hmm.
And invariably, always, I wind up taking it apart and working with it till I really feel that for me, this is what satisfying.
Okay.
So
What's the response been to your work? Particularly for the mops. There's many other things that we're going to touch on, but what have people said?
I think that over the years, it's that I do many different things, but it's the one constant that people seem to respond to the most.
Hmm.
They don't know quite what to make of them, some people.
Okay.
Some people have said, well, what do you do with these? Um, I think that people feel they're so unusual, and each is completely unique and different from all the others.
Right.
So the response has been really good, and I think of them truly like a family. Like I would love, I in part would love to see them go someplace, but
Hmm.
I'd really love to see all of them go someplace together.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't
Okay.
know.
A full exhibit of all of the
I would.
mop. What we call these? You call them headdresses. Is
I
that
do
correct?
call them headdresses,
Okay.
and I've thought about different titles, and in the end, they're called mop with soda can tabs, mop with something else. I feel like it makes you, it says it all for me. I don't know.
Okay. So then, ask the question for me.
Okay.
Does it start with you having an idea in mind and looking for the object that would bring that idea into fruition? Or do you see an object and then the process sort of opens up for you as to what that could become?
Both.
Ah,
Both. Sometimes something just grabs me, and that's my starting point. And other times, for instance, like with the Venetian blinds,
right.
that was the concept, and then it clicked at some point with a how to do it, but the concept of the Venetian blinds was the starting point.
Okay.
I will also say I did a series of flags, and for instance, and that was toward the beginning of really focusing in on recycled materials.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was after 9/11, and I was driving on the highway, and I passed on 95 a billboard that said drink such and such, and it
Mm-hmm.
was blue.
Okay.
And then I passed another billboard, and it said drink such and such, and it was red. And it was just sort of, it was advertisements, but it was at a time when we were seeing lots of flags and patriotism was
Mm,
high.
okay.
And I kept thinking red, blue as I'm driving. And it occurred to me that I could use those, they were cans, I could take those apart and do something related to the red, white, and blue.
Okay.
And that's where the idea for the flag started. And
Ah.
I went to the recycle place and bought a bunch of these recycled cans
Mm-hmm.
and cut them apart. And again, I thought, oh, I was cutting them with metal snips, and I thought, I wish I could cut these on a paper cutter. It would be so much quicker. And
Uh-huh.
then I thought, well, why not?
Wow.
And that's how everything sort of started. So,
Right, right. Wow. And we just put up an image of the flag
oh,
and the really close details so folks can see what you're talking about here. Out of recycled cans, you
yes.
created these. Amazing, amazing. So now let's talk a little bit about the other projects that you've done. You have a line that's called Houses,
Yes.
and tell us how that came about.
Well, I was doing a residency at Ragdale in near Chicago, and I had been accepted to come for 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
and live there and have a studio and work. And I decided I needed to challenge myself and go without anything I was comfortable with.
Mm.
So I thought I'm going to just sort of wipe the slate clean and
Okay.
see what come up with. And I shipped cartons and cartons of just stuff. And what grew out of that was that I very much like books. I had made books when I was a paper maker,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought this is sort of my home for 2 weeks. And from that, I thought, well, I'm going to make some books, but they're going to be like an autobiography. I'll make them in the shape of a house, and each part, you'll see the back and the front because it would open like an accordion.
Right.
Each part of it will be something that is in my home, and my home had to do with these cartons of things. And that's where I got the first set of houses, and from there I expanded and took each part of a house and decided to put some on the wall, and from
Okay.
there I got to bigger houses and diptychs and triptychs. And
Wow.
but it all started with that idea of, you know, starting with something that I knew nothing about.
Okay. Amazing.
Okay.
And these houses, these are made out of what?
The base is made out of either wood or masonite,
Okay.
since the masonite particularly won't warp, and they have evolved into taking olive oil cans and tomato cans and cutting them apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've evolved into something where some of them are metal and some have wood, and they've become the ultimate transformation for me of the houses. Is I decided to make an altarpiece, not literally, but it's a standing sculpture that opens and closes,
Uh-huh.
and it's covered with olive oil, anchovy, tomato cans in patterns, taken apart
Right.
and then put back together to form something new.
From something different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're really incredible. I mean,
Thank
you
you.
look at these and there are tuna labels and
Yep.
like you said the olive oil and tomatoes, and you recognize these.
You do.
But you see them in a totally different way, a different perspective on something again that is an everyday object,
Right.
which I love.
Me too.
Absolutely love. How important is it for you to be using these recycled, repurposed materials?
I think it has educated me, actually. I didn't start out doing this because I felt it was important to me to recycle.
Okay.
They were totally my art materials. But for myself, as a result of all of this, I've become so aware about recycling.
Yes.
I would say I recycle like totally as much as I can, either by using it in my art or literally, by recycling and then taking them back to recycle centers.
Okay.
So, but it didn't start out that way. It evolved.
But it's very much now a core, it
Yes.
seems, of the work that you do. And a perfect example of that are your crocheted vessels,
Yeah.
which I find just fascinating. And another aha moment, another moment of inspiration was when you first realized that you could use the
Plastic
plastic
bags.
bags. Tell a story, please.
Well, every day I go out, pick up my New York Times,
Hmm.
pick up the bag for, years and years and years,
Right,
pick up the bag, take the newspaper out, and then recycle the bag.
right.
And one day, truly, I don't know why, it was very sunny. I walked out, and I think of it as standing in a new place again. I looked down, and for the first time, I noticed the bag, and I
Mm.
noticed the color of that brilliant blue. And I took the newspaper out, took the bag, and then I began to experiment, and I tried cutting it in all different ways, and I came up with a way to make yarn, so to speak, which means like long things,
Right.
out of the plastic. Where you cut across and you get almost like calamari circles, and then loop them together. And once I discovered that, there was no limit. I had all my friends saving their plastic bags, and they different
Oh,
newspapers come
my.
in different colors,
Right.
and then started crocheting,
Mm.
which I did not know how to do. I got a book. I started teaching myself, and from that started these vessels. And I have one at home now that's about 5 feet tall. That's almost done.
Wow. Wow.
So it's a whole other thing, and the materials cost nothing. I love that.
That is so ingenious. I'm going to tell
Really
you.
nice.
That is really fantastic. And we should touch on before we have to leave today, um, the the piano parts
Hmm.
that you have found and then created art from, as well as a very interesting story about this opera jacket
Oh, with the
with the
ties.
ties.
Yeah,
Yes.
I uh, I had torn out of the New York Times actually this image of a Chinese opera coat
Mm-hmm.
that I thought was beautiful and tacked up in my studio, and it just was there for years. And my husband culled his ties one day, and he had all these ties that are beautiful patterns that were wearing out. And I took them because I recycle, and I kept looking at them and looking at the Chinese opera coat and
Uh-huh.
thought, I can do something with those. And that opera coat grew out of the Chinese coat
Oh my.
and made of his ties. And I'm currently working on a new tie project for a show that's coming up, a wall piece, which is totally different.
Mm, mm-mm. And then, of course, the piano parts that you found and created art pieces to hang.
I found them in a dump,
Okay.
and then ultimately, interestingly, I found parts of a piano in a dump and took them and cleaned them and took them apart. And when I had a show recently, well, 2 years ago, someone came up to me and said, I have a piano in my garage. If you want it, it's old. You
You
can
could
have
have it.
it.
Yeah,
And I hired
absolutely.
somebody, and he brought me the piano, and I took the whole
Wow.
piano apart
Oh,
for
that
the
is
parts.
amazing. That is amazing. And you've created all these fantastic art pieces. And the thing about it is, you don't stay with any one particular
Right,
project or type of material. It's like you're inspired by
right.
different materials, different everyday objects, and then you create based on what that brings to you. Which is just fantastic. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I
Okay,
do want to talk a little bit about what you have coming up next because I know that you're going to be part of a project that is opening up in New Rochelle
right.
in the very near future. Before you tell us about that, please give us your website so that folks can go on and really learn more about what you're doing and see more of your work.
Well, my website is my name, MaryAnnLomonaco.com.
Okay.
And there are images and other information about what I do, and
Okay.
much is things we've talked about today.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. So now coming up, your next exhibit, and you have exhibited all over the country. Let's just let folks know that, and are in so many collections. I mean, we couldn't possibly list them all here, and have won so many awards for your work, merit awards from Penn State University, first place 3D category from Lafayette Art Association, a fellowship from NIFA, which us folks in the arts know as New York Foundation for the Arts, and first prize excellence in sculpture. So your work has been recognized nationwide, and we are so pleased that you're here in Westchester doing this
Me
work
too.
and contributing really to a better awareness and understanding of what we can do with objects
Hmm.
on an everyday basis, looking at them in a very different way. So now, what is this project that you're going to be in New Rochelle?
In the fall, there's a new space, a new project that's beginning. It's going to be called Recology.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a wonderful location, an old building that's being redone, and there's going to be a cafe that's going to have vegetarian and some vegan food. And I just went to a tasting, and the chef is just outstanding.
Oh yes, I was there.
Yeah,
I
that was
second that.
great.
Absolutely, that was great.
And then there's going to be Recology, the store, which had been in Larchmont, has
Right.
been in Larchmont for several years and outgrew its space. And there's going to be a much bigger shop. And then there's going to be an art gallery, and they've asked me to be their opening exhibition. And this
Okay.
should be in the fall.
This is in the fall.
Yeah.
So folks will be able to get information, I'm sure, on your website when all the details are set. And also they'll be able to go to recology.com
Right.
to find out information there, as well as if they want to email info@recology.com if they want to
Right.
be able to chat with somebody about what's coming up. Absolutely fantastic, Marianne. Thank you
Thank you.
so
Thank you
much
for
for
having
being
me.
with us today. We look forward to seeing more from you
Thank
as
you
the
so
time goes
much.
on. And thank you for joining us. We are so happy to be able to share this information with you about the innovation and the creativity that our artists here in Westchester are doing. We hope to see you again soon. Take care.